Hi, everyone. It's really an honor to close out today's program and to be here with so many of you who have spent the week learning and sharing and imagining the future of what's possible for farming in our country. And what I want to talk about today goes really to the heart of that future. Who controls our food, how that impacts us, how that control impacts us, and what it would look like if policy finally served the people who feed us. Washington, D.C. is once again preparing another farm bailout. It will be the third round of farm aid in less than a year. This playbook is pretty familiar. When markets fail, bailouts follow. During the last trade war, farmers received $28 billion in relief payments, but most of that money went to the largest and wealthiest producers of commodity crops. Much of it went to global meat packers like Brazil's JBS, and even to billionaires living in cities here in the US, not to the people growing the foods that actually feed us. I was talking with a farmer here. She grows mixed vegetables and pasture-raised eggs, sells into local schools, keeps meticulous records of her soil health, and the last time the input costs skyrocketed, markets crashed, and the checks started going out, she called her local FSA office to ask if she qualified. The answer was a simple no. She doesn't grow a commodity. So while the big checks rolled out to the largest operations, planting fence row to fence row, she and thousands like her just kept going anyway. These are the farmers who are feeding our communities. They're building soil, they're proving that resilience is possible, yet they're the ones consistently left out of this system designed to, quote, feed the world. And that exclusion hits hardest for farmers with the fewest resources, beginning farmers, farmers of color, and farm workers, the people keeping our food system alive, but often shut out of its rewards. What I want to talk about today is who our food system truly serves, and what it would look like if policy started serving the people who really feed us. So to answer that, we have to look at who really holds the power, because the challenges that farmers face are not random. They're the result of a system that's been designed to serve just a few at the very top. Economists use a basic rule of thumb to measure how concentrated a market is. If the top 4 companies control more than 40% of the market, that's when abuses like price fixing and manipulation become a lot more likely. In food and agriculture, most sectors are now far beyond that point, from seeds and fertilizer to equipment to meat packing and all the way to grocery retail. My organization, Farm Action, is a watchdog for large corporations in the food system and for government accountability. And those corporations lobby to write policies that benefit themselves. So we've built an agriculture consolidation data hub to investigate and expose consolidation and corruption in the food system. So I'd like to run through just a few examples of how a handful of corporations dominate our entire food system. So first up is fertilizer. Back in 1990, there were dozens of fertilizer companies competing in North America. Today, there are only a few left. Across nitrogen, phosphorus, and potash, what used to be a diverse marketplace has consolidated into near monopoly control. Here you can see how concentrated the US seed market has become. The top 4 companies control 70% of soybean seed, 80% of cotton seed, or corn seed, and 90% of cotton seed. And these are far past the point where economists say abuses are likely in these marketplaces. In agricultural equipment, just 2 companies, John Deere and CNH, dominate nearly the entire US market. John Deere alone controls over half of all large tractor sales and 60% of the combine market. That leaves farmers with virtually no competition or leverage when prices rise or when these companies decide to restrict repairs and stop farmers from fixing their own equipment. And then there's meat packing, one of the worst offenders. Four beef packers, Tyson, Cargill, JBS, and National Beef, control 85% of the US beef market. And the brands you see here, they might look like competition, but they all roll up into the same handful of corporations. And then finally, grocery. Just four grocery chains, Walmart, Kroger, Costco, and Albertsons, control almost 70% of the US grocery market. Walmart alone controls more than a third of all grocery sales. And it gives these retailers enormous power over prices, suppliers, and even what food ends up on the shelves. And it also concentrates food deserts and diet-related diseases into low-income and rural communities. So here's what this all means. When just a few corporations control every link in the food chain, from the seeds to the supermarket, farmers, workers, and consumers all lose their power to negotiate. The companies in the middle, the ones controlling the inputs, processing, and retail, they get to set the rules for everybody else. And this isn't just an economic problem, it's a moral and ecological one. It determines what is available for Americans to eat, what kids get to eat at school, and even how the land is treated. The farmers doing the right thing, building soil, feeding their neighbors, growing healthy food, are the ones mostly often shut out of markets and these safety nets. And it's often the farmers with the fewest resources who face the steepest barriers in trying to break in. We can see how fragile this model is when even one piece breaks, like when China decided to stop buying US soybeans. Earlier this year, China suddenly stopped buying US soybeans. China was the country that had been purchasing more than half of our exports. Overnight, bins were full, prices collapsed, and once again, farmers were left dependent on another federal bailout. It's not just about soybeans, it's about how fragile our entire system has become. Because when one major buyer halfway around the world changes course, the entire structure starts to wobble. That's what happens when we build our food economy around exports and corporate consolidation instead of local markets and resilience. And so when those taxpayer-funded bailouts go out, most of that support flows to the biggest players, the same few corporations that dominate commodity agriculture. Meanwhile, the farmers growing food for their communities see little to no relief, even though they're hit just as hard by higher input costs and volatile markets. And it's really not an accident, it's a policy failure. That kind of fragility, it doesn't happen by chance. It's the result of decades of choices that concentrated power into fewer and fewer hands. We're told that this system would make America the world's breadbasket. But this chart tells a different story. After decades of policies focused on export growth, the US is now running an agricultural trade deficit. We're importing more food than we export, to the tune of $50 billion. And it's not just coffee or bananas, it's fruits, vegetables, even beef. That means that our policies are not feeding the world, and they're not even feeding us. They're feeding the bottom line of global corporations. And they've left millions of Americans, especially rural folks and low-income communities, struggling to access the healthy food that our farmers know how to grow. So, for decades, Washington, D.C. has rewarded volume rather than values. After the 1980s farm crisis, consolidation really accelerated, and every administration since then has let it slide. Subsidies favor chemical-dependent monocultures. Checkoff programs, a USDA tax, funnel farmer dollars to lobbying groups that promote the very systems driving farmers out. Antitrust enforcement has all but vanished, driving farm consolidation. Just since 2017, we've lost 162,000 farms. That's 63 family farms going out of business every single day in our country. And discrimination in credit and land access has compounded these losses for Black, Indigenous, and immigrant producers. So all of this, consolidation, lost in farms, the broken markets, it's really the backdrop for every major policy debate that's happening right now. And I want to just focus on one of those as an example. And that's, it's whether Washington, D.C. is willing to change course and step up and address the Make America Healthy Again initiative, or MAHA. The MAHA movement started with a real promise, finally connecting food, health, and farming. So where does that stand today? So MAHA began, in my opinion, with a bold vision, putting farmers at the center of the nation's health. The MAHA Commission's assessment report that came out this May, it named the right problems. It called out corporate consolidation, it called out distorted subsidies, it called out even chemical dependence, and it exposed how farmers are losing ground in the food dollar, keeping just 16 cents while corporations pocket the other 84 cents. So this assessment report showed that Washington, D.C. understood many of the problems, but the real question is whether they're willing to act on it. Then came the MAHA strategy report this fall, and it fell short. It was billed as a plan to make America healthy, but it backed away from the hard truths that the commission itself had laid out just months earlier. The White House admitted to meeting with more than 100 agribusiness lobbyists as it developed this strategy, including many funded by USDA checkoff programs. So it's not a surprise that the strategy sidestepped the biggest issues, while USDA quietly took actions that run directly counter to the MAHA initiative. So just this year, we've seen conservation programs cut, local food purchasing was cut, $1 billion towards that. Farm to School was defunded for 2025. It has been brought back for next year, but at a significantly smaller amount. And then state antitrust programs were canceled as well. And all the while, taxpayer subsidies and bailouts continue to flow to the same corporate players that MAHA was supposed to challenge. So we can't make America healthy if we keep funding the same monopolies that are making us sick. So what do we do about it? We come together and we demand policy that reflects the work that you all are already doing on your farms. So after the MAHA strategy report came out, weak, watered down, and clearly written under industry pressure, we decided to do something about it. A few weeks ago, Farm Action joined together with 120 MAHA leaders, farmers, medical professionals, and sent a letter to USDA Secretary Brooke Rollins. And it was a pretty simple message. Start to align USDA policy with the MAHA initiative. And that means supporting the people who grow healthy food. Because right now, USDA is talking about another round of farm aid, the third one in less than a year, and we're seeing the same pattern. When markets fail, bailouts follow. But those payments mostly go to commodity producers, not the farmers feeding their neighbors. So our letter calls on USDA to break that cycle and start investing in farmers who feed people. Every community deserves access to healthy food and a fair chance to grow it, and that's what these policies are about. So here's what that could look like and what our coalition letter called for. One is to redirect USDA purchasing to farmers growing healthy food. Government is actually the largest purchaser of food in the United States. Of the $5 billion USDA purchasing budget, half of that goes to just 25 corporations. So we're asking USDA to make sure that a meaningful share of that money starts going to organic, pasture-based, and regenerative farms instead. Number two, restore local food and school programs that connect farmers to eaters. Programs like Local Food for Schools and Farm to School, as I mentioned, were wiped out this year. And those cuts hurt both children and farmers, and those need to be reinstated. Number three, invest in kitchen infrastructure and training so schools can start cooking real food again. School cafeterias are forced to rely on ultra-processed meals because they no longer have the equipment and the staff to start cooking from scratch. So we're calling for infrastructure to change that. Number 4, support organic and regenerative transitions with technical and financial help. USDA cut staff at the National Organic Program and the conservation offices, the very people that farmers rely on for guidance. We need those programs fully staffed and funded. Number 5, rebuild conservation capacity. More NRCS staff in the field, not fewer. Over 2,400 NRCS staff positions are left unfilled right now, and that means fewer conservation plans, fewer field visits, and less support for soil health. So we're asking USDA to rebuild that capacity. Number 6, reform commodity checkoff programs. Right now, checkoff dollars, these are mandatory fees taken from farmers by the USDA, and they're being used to fund the same trade and lobbying groups that are working against antitrust reform and a healthy food system. So we're calling for independent audits, and we're calling on USDA to stop awarding those funds to corporate lobbying groups. And then finally, number 7, ensure relief and support reaches all farmers, not just commodity operations. The farmers feeding people are almost always excluded from aid packages. Just one example, fruit and vegetable growers here in the U.S. only receive 4% of taxpayer-funded subsidies. So our letter demands that that relief starts reaching all farmers. These actions would strengthen what you all are already doing on your farms, producing healthy food and stewarding the land. And that's what we're fighting for these reforms, so that federal policy can finally catch up with the people who are already growing the future of American agriculture. So that's what we're asking of policymakers, to start adapting as quickly and courageously as farmers already do. It's time for a food policy that serves the farmers who feed people, not the monopolies that are feeding off of them. Thank you. This conference is about cultivating adaptability. Farmers know what adaptability really means. It's not a buzzword, it's what you're doing every day on your farms. You adapt when the rain doesn't come, you adapt when markets collapse or policies change. You adapt because you have to, because no one else is going to do it for you. But what's missing is a system that adapts with you. A food system that recognizes the kind of farming that rebuilds soil instead of stripping it. Policies that support farmers who grow real food for people, not just commodities for corporations. A government that sees adaptability not as something to demand from farmers, but something to start practicing itself. That's the shift we need, from a system that reacts to crisis to one that invests in resilience. From top-down control to community-led solutions. From extraction to renewal. And you all are already doing your part, and now it's time for the policy to catch up to that. If we want to make America healthy, let's start making it fair for the farmers who feed us. We can have any kind of food system we want as long as we have the policy to support it. So stay connected, stop by our booth, we're still out there. Sign up for our newsletter, take our materials home. When you get there, reach out to your members of Congress and tell them what regenerative looks like, regenerative farming looks like, and that it works. The future of our food system depends on policy that catches up with the farmers who are already leading the way. Thank you.
All right, who has some questions? Okay.
Yes, it was 2010, I believe. I'm a civil engineer, and I was kind of overseeing some engineering students who had the project, and one of the farmers there says to us, says when we're hungry, America sends us their surplus grain. And he says, you know what that makes us? America's cows.
Good comment.
Yeah, thank you.
Question or comment?
Thank you very much for your presentation. Just a quick question. Are there particular members of Congress or the Senate who are especially, thoughtful, visionary on these issues that you recommend we, take a look at and follow?
That's a good question. It's something we've really been working to navigate. There are some members on both sides of the aisle, I think, that are doing what they can in their way. On the right, we've got Senator Grassley, who's been willing to step out for antitrust issues. We've got a country of origin labeling legislation in both the House and the Senate right now. The sponsors of those bills, including Speaker John Thune of the Senate, who's in a powerful position there, has really been willing to speak out. On the left, we've got Senator Cory Booker, who we've worked with for a long time. We've got Representative Chellie Pingree in Maine, who's been willing to step up. So there are a few folks. I think when it comes to the agriculture committees in the House and the Senate, unfortunately, they're pretty dug in on big ag. That's who they're hearing from. That's who that's who's walking the halls every day, and that's who's funding their campaigns. So that's definitely an uphill battle. But those are folks, if you look at the House and Senate ag committees, who need to be hearing from folks like you all every day, I think.
Hi. Yep, okay. Hi. I am an author, and I'm writing a book about this. About generally the issues at large about the food industry, but especially the beef industry. And it took me about 3 years to find an agent who would take it, and then another few years to find a publisher who would take the risk, because they said they were afraid they were going to be sued by specifically the beef checkoff. And more and more I find that the more small ranchers I talk to, they're paying into these funds that are not representing them at all. And I wonder if you have any ideas on, other than fully dismantling the checkoff system as it exists in the US currently, what could we do to change it from within? Are there roles that people can go out for? Are there jobs that people can try and take and change things from within? Or is it really just a dismantling of the system at this point?
Yeah, great question. So the way we've been approaching it is several different avenues. So one could be through the Congress. There is a bipartisan bill led by Senator Cory Booker and Senator Mike Lee that would prohibit checkoff dollars from being awarded to organizations that lobby on policy. It would also call for audits and for transparency, showing producers how those funds are spent. So that's one avenue. That bill is called the Opportunities for Fairness in Farming Act. Another pathway is simply through the USDA. We have not seen, I think, the willingness from USDA to take this on, but Secretary Brooke Rollins today could stop signing off on checkoff payments and basically shut the programs down until audits are done, until the programs are cleaned up. So that USDA does have that authority. And then the final pathway is through producer referendums. So the producers in any certain commodity can get together, have a referendum, and vote. Unfortunately, this happened, I think, a couple decades now, and the pork checkoff is the last time someone pulled this off. They voted to end the pork checkoff, and it was overturned by USDA illegally. So that checkoff is still running today. So getting something done from within, I think that's a big lift because of how those programs are controlled. For example, in the beef checkoff, the National Cattlemen's Beef Association controls 50% of the votes of where the money goes, and surprise, they award 70% or more of the money to themselves. You know, they're deciding, they're having a lot of influence on who even gets onto those boards. So that's not a very encouraging answer, I guess, but I think pushing on all of these pathways, though, is important. Pushing at the local level, you know, complaining to the local checkoff officials and making your voice heard, writing letters to the editor, you know, any way to keep raising awareness about these programs, because they're truly funding the opposition to what we're all trying to accomplish here when it comes to policy, because they're walking the halls with checkoff dollars and with the checkoff brand on their materials, giving them credibility as if they're the voice of America's farmers.
I actually asked this question my first day in a workshop, but I'm just interested in collecting a variety of perspectives. And you mentioned, you know, shifting subsidies, shifting aid away from these big corporations towards small, sustainable producers. What do you think is, I guess, the role of subsidies versus incentive programs? You know, tax cuts such as that. Is one more useful? Is a combination helpful? Yeah, what do you think?
I don't know that I can speak to the intricacies of those programs. You know, what we're trying to do, excuse me, we're trying to shift the direct subsidies, right? So more of those are going to diversified farms. We're trying to shift the crop insurance programs. Right now, a lot of producers don't even qualify, and the crop insurance providers don't want to work with farms that have multiple different commodities because it's a lot more work for them. So we're looking at those kind of barriers and how to overcome those so that farmers have more access. And then we're also naming specific programs. You know, I named a couple here that we're asking to get refunded. So there are certain programs that money could go into and that farmers could apply and access. So I think, I guess the answer is, you know, multiple pathways, I think, and trying to get done whatever we can.
All right, we have one more question.
Hi, thanks for your excellent presentation. I'm curious about like gold standard case studies of countries that just like got it all right in terms of policies, and if you have any in mind or any like particularly innovative or impactful policies that just work in other countries.
That's a great question. I don't have a good answer for you right off the top of my head. That's something that we're interested in looking to kind of more globally and looking what we can emulate. So maybe we could stay in touch and I could try to get back to you on that one.
All right, thank you, Angela.
Thank you so much.